a mother leopard, desperate and starving, standing on her hind legs before a crumbling statue, her paws pressed together as if in prayer. It's a scene that would change lives forever. The African savanna stretched endlessly beneath the burning afternoon sun, its golden grasses swaying in the hot wind. It was a landscape that seemed eternal, filled with both beauty and danger. Herds of antelope moved carefully across the plains. Vultures circled lazily high above, and, hidden in the shadows, predators waited with patience as old as time. For Daniel Alvarez, a seasoned wildlife rescuer from Spain, this land was both a second home and a never-ending classroom. He had spent years working with conservation groups across Africa, dedicating his life to saving animals in distress. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the extraordinary sight he was about to witness. That afternoon, Daniel traveled with two companions. Ethan Cole, a field medic from Canada, known for his calm under pressure, and Amara Nolovu, a skilled tracker from a nearby village whose knowledge of the land was unmatched. Together, they formed a small but determined rescue team that responded whenever the local rangers reported injured or endangered wildlife. They were meant to check a dried riverbed where traps had sometimes been set by poachers. The walk was long and the silence heavy, broken only by the crunch of their boots against the earth. Then Amara froze, raising her hand for silence. "Look," she whispered, pointing ahead. In the distance, near the crumbling remains of an old stone chapel, long abandoned by missionaries, a spotted shape trembled in the shadows. At first, Daniel thought it was a large dog, but as they drew closer, his breath caught. It was a mother leopard. Her once sleek coat was matted, her body shockingly thin. Her ribs pressed against her skin, and her legs shook as though every movement drained the last of her strength. She stood upright on her hind legs, balancing unsteadily, and lifted her two front paws together as though pressing them in prayer. She faced the crumbling statue of the Virgin Mary that still stood at the chapel's entrance, its surface cracked yet serene. Behind her, hidden in a shallow hollow in the earth, 3 tiny cubs huddled close. 2 whimpered softly, their small bodies shivering from weakness and cold. The third lay frighteningly still, barely moving, its tiny chest rising only in faint, irregular breaths. Daniel's heart clenched. He had seen many desperate animals before, but never something that looked so much like prayer, so much like a plea beyond words. The mother leopard's golden eyes were wide, filled with desperation and something else, something that looked remarkably like faith. "She's begging," Amara whispered, her voice trembling. "She's begging the statue for help." For a moment, the 3 humans stood frozen, humbled by the sight. Then, Daniel forced himself into action. "We have to help now." Ethan dropped his medical kit to the ground, already preparing syringes and fluids. Amara carefully moved to one side, her hands out, murmuring softly to calm the mother leopard. Remarkably, the big cat did not snarl or strike. She trembled, she whimpered, but she did not attack. It was as if she understood these humans had come not as enemies, but as her only hope. Daniel knelt beside the smallest cub, the one that lay unmoving. His chest tightened. The tiny creature was ice cold, its breath shallow, its heartbeat barely there. Ethan knelt beside him quickly. "It's weak," Ethan said softly, almost to himself. "But not gone. If we work fast, we might pull it back." The mother leopard whined anxiously, pacing in a small circle, her eyes darting between the cub and the human's hands. Every instinct in her wild heart must have screamed to snatch the cub away, yet she stayed. She stayed because somewhere inside she seemed to know this was the only chance. Blankets were unrolled. Warm milk was prepared. The other 2 cubs were wrapped carefully and pressed against bottles of warm water to fight off the chill that had sunk into their bones. Villagers, alerted by Amara's signal, soon arrived with more supplies, food, water, and cloth. Within minutes, the silent ruin of the old chapel was filled with the sound of hurried footsteps, whispered prayers, and the steady, focused rhythm of human compassion. Then came the stillness. Everyone seemed to hold their breath as Ethan worked gently on the limp cub, massaging its chest, feeding it drops of warm milk through a small syringe, wrapping it tightly in cloth. Daniel's hands trembled as he held the fragile body steady. The villagers formed a circle, their eyes wide, their hearts pounding. Minutes passed, long and unbearable. Then, in the hush, the cub twitched. A tiny chest rose and fell. Once, again, then weakly the cub opened its eyes. Gasps echoed through the ruined church. Some villagers clutched their mouths. Others wept openly. Amara bowed her head, whispering, "It's a miracle." The mother leopard, as if understanding, let out a low, trembling purr. She pressed her head against Daniel's shoulder, a gesture so gentle and unexpected that he felt tears sting his eyes. In that moment, predator and human, wild and tame, stood united in something far greater than fear, a shared hope for life. From that day, everything changed. The villagers, moved by what they had seen, decided the old chapel could no longer remain in ruin. Together, they repaired its broken windows, swept away the dust and cobwebs, and placed fresh flowers at the feet of the Virgin Mary statue. But they also did something more unusual. They turned the chapel into a sanctuary, a refuge not for worshippers alone but for abandoned and endangered animals. Wooden shelters were built along the walls. Water bowls and feeding stations were placed in the corners. The place that had once been silent became a haven of life and mercy. The mother leopard and her cubs stayed for a time, recovering their strength under the protection of the people. She never harmed anyone. Instead, she lay curled around her cubs, her golden eyes watchful but calm as children brought food or blankets close. Among the villagers who came daily was a boy named Samuel. He was an orphan, thin and withdrawn, a child who rarely spoke and often wandered alone at the edge of the village. His parents had died years earlier, and though the community cared for him, his sorrow had made him distant. But when Samuel first saw the leopard cubs, something stirred in him. He knelt quietly beside them, his hand trembling as he reached out. To everyone's surprise, the cubs wagged their tiny tails and licked milk from his fingers. Samuel smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. The villagers noticed. That evening, as they gathered in the restored chapel, someone whispered, "Why don't we take him in as well? He needs a family as much as those little ones." Heads nodded. And so, just as they embraced the mother leopard and her cubs, they also embraced Samuel. From then on, he was never alone. The mother leopard would curl protectively around him at night. The cubs climbed into his lap, their tiny paws tugging at his shirt. The villagers brought him food, clothes, and love. Slowly, the boy's heart opened. He laughed again, played with the other children, and for the first time, truly belonged. Years later, the story was still told. People spoke of a starving leopard who had stood on trembling legs before a statue, paws pressed together like a prayer. They spoke of a dying cub that opened its eyes again beneath the Virgin Mary's calm gaze. They spoke of an old church that was no longer abandoned, and of a lonely boy who found a family in the embrace of both humans and animals. To Daniel Alvarez, who returned often to visit, it was more than a rescue. It was a reminder. Mercy knows no boundaries. Love in its purest form can heal not only the weak and the lost, but entire communities. And somewhere in the tall grasses of the savannah, a leopard and her grown cubs roamed free once more, their golden coats glistening in the sun. They were wild, untamed, and unreachable. Yet every time the villagers looked toward the horizon, they remembered the day the wild itself had knelt in prayer, and how compassion had answered.